They thought she was nobody, a ghost in a faded flight suit. But when the simulator screamed and every expert froze, she rewrote the impossible in 180 seconds. The door slid open at exactly 2:15 p.m. Hot Texas air rushed into the simulator bay before being swallowed by the sterile chill inside. Rows of server towers blinked in rhythm. The smell of burnt coffee, antiseptic, and overheated circuits hung thick in the air. No one looked up. A woman stepped inside wearing an olive-drab flight suit. No name patch, no rank insignia, no unit tape, nothing. The kind of suit worn by maintenance techs or civilian contractors people you ignore because they're background noise. But she didn't move like a contractor. Her steps were measured, deliberate, not fast, not slow, just precise. Like someone who knew exactly where every wire, every console, every weakness in the room was hidden. She paused near the main instructor's console, hands loose at her sides, eyes scanning the telemetry stream crawling across the monitors. Lines of code, diagnostics, flight data. Most instructors barely glanced at that stuff. She read it like poetry. The younger officer candidates shot quick glances her way, then dismissed her with that unconscious arrogance of people too busy proving themselves. She was a woman. No rank, no credentials visible. In their minds, she didn't matter. But Technical Sergeant Ryan Cole noticed her. Cole had 20 years in uniform, most of it spent training hotshot lieutenants who thought they knew everything. After 10 hours of flight time, he didn't like surprises. He liked order, structure, predictability, and he especially didn't like strangers near his equipment. His eyes narrowed as he watched her from across the bay. She wasn't fidgeting, wasn't lost, wasn't fumbling with a tablet or asking questions. She just stood there, observing, calm, still, like she was waiting for something, or like she already knew what was about to happen. Cole shifted his weight and stepped away from the trainee he'd been coaching. His boots echoed softly on the polished floor. He didn't approach her yet, not directly. He just positioned himself where he could keep watching. She had no badge, no laptop, no clipboard, just that faded flight suit and eyes that didn't miss a single detail. The room hummed with quiet intensity. Screens flickered with data. Voices murmured near the coffee station. Somewhere, a keyboard clacked, but none of that noise touched her. She stood like a shadow in a place built for movement, and the stillness around her felt almost uncomfortable. Cole finally stepped closer, not quite into her space, but near enough to remind her this was his domain. She didn't flinch, didn't even look at him. Her gaze stayed locked on the stream of telemetry data flowing across the screen. Cole's jaw tightened. He said nothing, but his posture hardened. A silent challenge. The others hadn't noticed yet, too busy with their own tasks. But Cole had, and he didn't recognize her. That meant one of two things. Either she didn't belong here, or she did. And somehow, that second possibility bothered him even more. He took another step forward, trying to provoke a reaction. Anything. A glance. An apology. An explanation. Nothing. Her silence felt deliberate. Not the silence of someone afraid to speak, but the kind that came from knowing she didn't need to. Whatever she was, whoever she was, Cole didn't like being unsure, and this woman made him feel very, very unsure. Something about her presence didn't fit. She wasn't just watching the simulation. She was studying it, analyzing it, and though she hadn't touched a single control, it felt like she was already in command of the room. Something was about to shift, but no one else seemed to realize it yet. The simulator roared to life at 2:30 p.m. Inside the sealed mock cockpit, Second Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell gripped the controls of the T6 Tech Center trainer. Her hands were steady, but already beginning to sweat. The emergency scenario had just begun. Outside the pod, monitors flickered with streams of real-time data. Instructors leaned in. Sergeant Cole hovered behind the main console, arms crossed, watching with the cold focus of a predator. The scenario should have been routine. Engine flameout, limited time to glide to a safe runway, basic emergency procedures. Mitchell had trained for this a dozen times, but something went wrong almost immediately. Warning lights that didn't belong to this script began flashing. A sudden violent yaw. The aircraft lurched. Instruments started contradicting each other. Inside the pod, Mitchell's voice crackled through the intercom. Sharp, focused. Aircraft pulling into unrecoverable spin. Instruments conflicting, requesting guidance. Cole barked back without hesitation. Apply opposite rudder. Stick forward. Neutralize your ailerons. You're panicking. Just follow procedure. But Mitchell wasn't panicking. Her voice stayed clipped and professional. She was flying the checklist. Her feet worked the pedals. Her hands moved with muscle memory. Still, the simulator wasn't responding. The aircraft model on the screen began spinning in an unnatural way. Her inputs weren't correcting anything. The telemetry started throwing red flags faster than anyone could process. The other instructors glanced at each other. Confusion flickered across their faces. This wasn't right. Something deeper was failing. Cole kept going. He raised his voice, told her to stop fighting the aircraft and fly the recovery. Standard protocol. Textbook response. He leaned over to initiate an override on the secondary console, but the woman in the olive flight suit was still standing there, silent, watching, hands behind her back, eyes locked on the data feed. She was in his way. Cole didn't ask her to move, didn't pause. With a grunt of irritation and zero warning, he shoved her aside. Not a bump, not a nudge. He lowered his shoulder and moved her like a piece of equipment that didn't belong. Her body hit the edge of the server rack with a hollow metallic clang. Heads snapped toward the sound. She didn't speak, didn't gasp or recoil, just absorbed the impact, straightened her flight suit with a slow, methodical tug at the front zipper, and shifted one step to the side. Her gaze never left the screen. The room shifted. It wasn't loud. No one shouted. No one moved. But something cracked. Something that had been silent and steady for years. The instructors froze. The students watched with wide eyes. Mitchell's breathing came rapid now through the comms. Her voice rising. Altitude falling. Spin increasing. Nothing responding. Cole leaned over the console. Stabbed at the keys. Nothing worked. The override failed. He cursed under his breath and repeated commands that had stopped making sense. He was losing control of the simulation, and he was losing control of the room. The woman remained quiet, but her presence was no longer passive. It was deliberate. Her silence didn't suggest confusion or fear. It was the silence of someone watching a predictable failure unfold. Cole finally looked at her. Really looked. And for the first time, something flickered in his face. Not anger. Not superiority. Uncertainty. Mitchell's voice broke through again. Sir, request permission to eject. The room held its breath. Cole froze. And the woman waited. Still silent. Still watching. No longer background. Now, the storm was circling her. The alarms wouldn't stop. Inside the sealed cockpit, Lieutenant Mitchell's voice came sharp over the intercom, layered with rising panic. She was in a flat spin. The aircraft was dropping fast. Nothing was responding. Altitude readouts plummeted on the central monitor. Red and amber warnings blinked in clusters across the display. Spin rate increasing. Airspeed decaying. No thrust. It was now to 33 p.m. and the simulator was no longer simulating a standard emergency. This was a full cascade failure. The inputs were being ignored. The system wasn't just locked. It was broken. Sergeant Cole slammed his hand on the console. Reverse rudder. Neutral stick. Nose down. His voice was too loud, cutting across the room like a blade. But no one moved. No one spoke. Nothing he tried worked. His hands hovered above the override keys like they had minutes ago. Except now they were shaking. Mitchell cried out again. I can't regain control. Altitude now below 5,000 feet. In real life, she'd have already been ordered to eject. Cole stepped back, visibly rattled. He reached for the comms, but didn't speak. For the first time, he looked lost. No command. No control. Just helpless noise in a room full of silence. Then the woman moved. She didn't rush. Didn't speak right away. She stepped forward from where she'd been standing. Expression calm. Posture firm. Everyone turned to her as if gravity had suddenly shifted. I have control, she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the chaos like a razor. Cole turned, confused. He scoffed and waved her off. What? Who the hell? But no one else dismissed her. She walked straight to the secondary instructor's seat. The one beside Cole's. Her movements were smooth, practiced. She sat, adjusted the seat height with a quick lever pull, and leaned forward into the console. Her fingers began to move. They didn't tap random keys. She wasn't guessing. She was typing with purpose. Lines of code instead of commands. No one had ever seen those functions used before. She opened a small panel hidden beneath the edge of the console. Maintenance level. Not in the instructor's handbook. She pulled back a latch, revealing a diagnostic port with a narrow row of physical toggles and to recess switches. She began to rewrite the system. She bypassed the corrupted logic that had jammed the simulator, restored direct actuator control to the control surfaces, unhooked faulty virtual flight envelope limiters. She didn't talk while doing it. She didn't explain. The simulator display began to change. Some warnings blinked off, others shifted from red to amber. The aircraft inside the simulation was still falling, but the spin was easing, rotation stabilizing. Altitude, 4,000 feet. No engine power. No simulated restart. Dead stick. The woman leaned into the flight control overlay and took the instructor stick, not to fly the aircraft manually, but to input data in sync with the rewired system logic. Her left hand adjusted trim levels. Her right made micro inputs on pitch control. She wasn't watching the cockpit view. She was reading the telemetry. Angle of attack, sync rate, airspeed yaw. She wasn't flying the simulator. She was flying the numbers. At 3,000 feet, she traded pitch for airspeed, lowering the nose carefully, bringing the aircraft just above stall threshold. The spin broke completely. The T6 in the simulation became a glider. There was a runway in view now, simulated, but real enough for everyone watching. The data stream on the right side of the screen flashed a new warning. Landing solution. Impossible. Too far. Not enough left. She ignored it. She held the glide path steady. Every movement was surgical. Every correction came half a second before anyone else might have thought to make it. 2,000 feet. Then 1,000. The digital horizon flattened. She brought the gear down. 500 feet. The simulated aircraft was descending fast, but clean. The simulated wheels touched down. Not hard, not heavy, just a soft thump, perfectly centered. The T6 rolled to a stop. The display flashed green. Landed. No one moved. No one spoke. At 2:36 p.m., the impossible had just happened, and the silent woman in the faded flight suit had done it like she'd done it 100 times before, like it was routine, like it was already over before it began. The simulator bay was silent. Every display still glowed. Every machine still hummed, but no one moved. The simulated T6 had landed. That much was clear. But what had just happened wasn't supposed to be possible. Not at that altitude. Not without power. Not with a system failure that deep. And certainly not by someone no one even recognized. At 2:36 p.m., the woman stepped back from the instructor's console. She didn't look around. Didn't wait for a reaction. Her hands dropped to her sides. Her eyes lowered just slightly. She looked, for a moment, like someone who had just finished a routine task. Not someone who had just rewritten the rules of aviation training. In front of a full room, Technical Sergeant Cole stood stiff near the server racks, still gripping the edge of the table. His knuckles were white. His mouth was slightly open. He hadn't spoken since the word landed had appeared on the screen. Now he just watched her. His gaze caught somewhere between disbelief and dread. The others were beginning to whisper. The young officers. The instructors. No one said her name. No one knew it. But they were no longer wondering who she was. They were wondering what she was. Lieutenant Colonel Henderson had been watching from the rear of the bay. Arms crossed. One eyebrow raised just slightly. He didn't speak either. Not at first. Then slowly. He turned and walked to the hardened terminal in the corner. The one that connected to secure personnel records. It took his keycard. Then a passcode. Then a fingerprint scan. The screen flickered and loaded. His face changed. The line of his mouth tightened. He stepped back, paused, then walked back into the center of the bay with slow, deliberate steps. His voice broke the silence. Attention. Everyone stiffened. Henderson's voice was calm, clear, formal. Brigadier General Evelyn Ward, callsign. Ghost. 8,231. Flight hours. 3 combat deployments. Led pilot in Operation Iron Reach, where she coordinated a defensive flight path that saved an entire transport squadron during an ambush in the Kona River Valley. He paused, let the weight settle. Recipient of the Silver Star Distinguished Flying Cross. Air Medal with 2 clusters. Another pause. She served as Principal Systems Advisor for the Air Force's Tactical Training Initiative. She helped design this very simulator. She didn't override anything. Henderson looked directly at the woman. She accessed her own code. The bay remained still. Then the final words. As of 0600 this morning, she is your new commanding officer. 33rd Training Wing. One by one, the trainees snapped to attention. Then the instructors. Chairs scraped. Hands flew to brows. Every movement sharp and formal. The room locked into place, except for Cole. He stayed where he was, unable to move, eyes still on her, his face pale. Not just with embarrassment, but something deeper. The slow, creeping realization that he had shoved a general. He had shoved a war hero. He had shoved the very architect of the simulator he claimed to command. Evelyn didn't look at him. Not out of cruelty, just purpose. She turned slowly, stepped once away from the console, and clasped her hands behind her back. Not in triumph, not in authority, just peace. The silence returned, but this time it carried weight, reverence, the kind that doesn't ask for recognition because it already has it. Unspoken, undeniable. Ghost wasn't a legend anymore. She was real, and she had just landed in the heart of their world. The meeting wasn't on the schedule. No one announced it. Technical Sergeant Ryan Cole had submitted the request quietly, through the chain of command. He didn't expect it to be approved. It had been 3 weeks since the incident in the simulator bay. 3 weeks since he'd been reassigned to logistics support. 3 weeks since he'd had to look his own pride in the mirror and see what it really cost. At 9:05 a.m., he was called into a small, windowless office near the command wing. Brigadier General Evelyn Ward was already there. She stood by the desk, arms relaxed at her sides. She didn't offer a seat, didn't smile, just waited. Cole stood at attention and spoke clearly. He offered no excuses. He acknowledged the disrespect. He owned the failure. His voice cracked once, but he didn't waver. He had spent his entire career believing he knew what right looked like. That day had proved him wrong. Ward listened without interrupting. When he finished, she gave a single nod. Her response was measured. When your knowledge failed, you fell back on ego instead of flexibility. You relied on rank and volume when what was needed was insight. Leadership means seeing the whole person in front of you, not just their uniform, not just the way they speak. She paused. I don't need an apology, Sergeant. What I need is for you to learn from this. Teach differently. See people differently. She didn't ask for anything in return. She didn't offer forgiveness. What she gave him was harder. A challenge. Months passed. Slowly, steadily. Cole was given clearance to return to the simulator wing. He came back changed. Gone was the loud confidence. Gone was the bite. He still demanded excellence. But now he explained why. He coached. He corrected without humiliation. He pushed students harder. But he lifted them too. He had a sharp eye now for the quiet ones. The ones who hesitated. The ones who listened more than they talked. He saw in them the potential he had once overlooked. And he made sure no one else missed it either. A brass plaque was quietly installed next to the instructor console. It didn't have a date or a rank, just a name. General Ward, the ghost in the system. And right beneath it, etched in the same metal, the name of the most difficult SIM module in the entire flight program. The Ward maneuver. A dead stick glide from under 3,000 feet. No thrust, no autopilot. All instinct. One afternoon, just before 3:00 p.m. Cole stood beside the console as a young cadet struggled through the maneuver. She was smart, but nervous. Her voice trembled. Her inputs wobbled. She was about to hit eject. Cole leaned forward and spoke into the MIC. His voice was calm, simple, steady. Breathe. Fly the numbers, not the fear. Competence doesn't always shout. She made the corrections. The spin broke. The glide held. The wheels touched down. The screen blinked. Landed. Cole smiled. Just a little. He looked up at the plaque and whispered under his breath. The ghost would be proud. If this story reminded you that true strength doesn't need to announce itself, that respect is earned, not demanded, and that the silent warriors among us often change the world without a word, then hit that like button. Subscribe to Silent Warriors for more untold stories of courage, humility, and leadership that rewrite the rules. Because the greatest heroes don't always wear their rank on their chest. Sometimes they wear nothing at all.